A bell tolled in the afternoon outside. Those that had stayed behind noticed the tenor of the room drastically changed. They slowly stood up from wherever they were sitting and they walked over to the large picture window and looked up sullenly at what could have been. See, earlier that morning they had gathered at the base of a mountain that was so picturesque, Ansel Adams himself would have been jealous. They took their selfies and their group picture, and they began their journey toward the summit together. At first, they were talkative and energetic. Pretty soon, the cold had just worn deep into their bones, and they found themselves as they were trudging through the powdery snow that their legs had grown weary. About noon, they came to this quaint alpine cottage. They walk inside and see this roaring fire, and they warm themselves and sit down to eat their lunch. Once they're full and comfortable, less than half the group decides to continue their ascent toward the summit. And now the bell had tolled. Those that remained behind were faced with the reality that they would never finish what they had set out for early that morning. Instead, they sacrificed that experience for only temporary comfort. I heard that story over 20 years ago from one of my mentors. And the lesson at the time was very clear. Craig, don't allow your life to sink into mediocrity. You have to remember why you started your climb in the first place. See, nobody intends to be halfway up a rugged mountain. This time for me was different. I had faced these moments halfway up a rugged mountain many times over and over in my life. And yet, here I was. My life, I remember where I was. I remember what I was doing. I remember what I was wearing when I was faced with the question that changed the trajectory of my life. My life was out of control. Not like complete chaos, but almost like I didn't have a say in where I was headed. Maybe you can relate. And it was this painfully simple question that changed everything for me. And it's the same question I'm going to challenge each of us in this room to ask ourselves. You ready? What do I want? I know. I can't believe that I never asked this question or honestly answered it until I was in my mid-30s. I stood there dumbfounded. And notice I carefully crafted this, right? What do I want? Not what does somebody else want of me or for me, or what's my religious tradition expect of me, or what should I want, but what do I want, really? When I was a teenager, I was taught over and over that my desires were meant to be tamed. But now I've come to believe that our deepest desires are not meant to be tamed, but unleashed. The word mediocre actually comes from two Latin words. The first is medi, which means middle, part way, halfway. The other is ochreous, which means rugged mountain. Again, no one intends to find themselves halfway up a rugged mountain. But my life hadn't sunk into mediocrity. That's not really where I found myself. I had simply forgotten my why. And that's what revelation really does for us. It brings clarity. I never finished my metaphoric climb. I walked away. I stopped. And I didn't look longingly toward the top. See, I had a new direction. I had clarity of purpose. There was a new mountain that I was to climb. So, my friends, when you find in your life that you are just going through the motions, or maybe your life feels out of control and there's no end in sight, I want to challenge you to stop and ask yourself the clarifying question. Because sometimes you need to remember why you are climbing so you can finish strong. And sometimes you find yourself halfway up a rugged mountain that you were never meant to climb in the first place. Thank you.